right now, with the special session underway with Keystone XL Pipeline, there are a lot of environmentalists who are converging on Lincoln that want to talk in this special session. I don't know that any of these people know what they're talking about. A lot of them, there's a difference between conserving and being a conservationist and being an environmentalist and being a phony environmentalist to the point of playing politics. And to really put a division between the two, I've asked to join me on the program Ann McElhinney. Ann is someone who, if I'm not mistaken, Ann, you used to be all about man-made global warming. It was going to destroy the planet. We only had a few minutes to live, right?
I don't know if I'd quite describe myself as that, but I certainly was. My position would have been, I would have been a default environmentalist, liberal journalist, which is the only kind of journalist there is in Europe. Believing all that stuff. I suppose really that organisations like the Sierra Club, like Greenpeace, were doing something lovely for the rest of us that were just too lazy to care. But I didn't do much myself. Obviously, I cared about the fact that the world would stay pollution-free. But I allowed Greenpeace to do their thing until, as a journalist, I covered a story where Greenpeace were involved and, had the blinkers taken off my eyes and realised that actually this organisation aren't really a lot about what they purport to be, that they're so agenda-driven, so ideologically driven, that they set aside truth in order to basically stop progress, which is what they seem to want to do.
And to clarify here, use the example of my wife. My wife does not like animal abuse. She's a former vegetarian, and she thought that she'd give money to a group like PETA because they seem to be out there protesting against animal abuse. And then she realized that all the money she was giving them was just going into political projects. And then once, a couple of years ago, PETA had a chance to rescue a bunch of animals. They said no, and the dogs ended up being killed or something like that. And she said, these guys just care about themselves and making money from people like me. She still doesn't like abuse of animals. She just doesn't give money to that political organization that is a phony animal rights activist group. In your case, you don't want pollution. I don't want dirty air. I don't want dirty water. But some of these groups out there that purport to be for the environment really have a whole different agenda, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And I think one of the things, I'm going to be speaking this weekend in Nebraska.
Yes.
You're probably going to give the details to your listeners.
I am, and I'll do so right now. Sunday at the Calvary Community Church, part of the Voices to Preserve America event, online at voicestopreserveamerica.com.
And I can give you a little preview of some of the things that I'm going to talk about. But one of the things, I'm not coming to Nebraska to tell Nebraskans about the sandhills of Nebraska, because they know very well plenty about it, and they know about their heritage and the wonderful land of Nebraska.
Not all of them. Not all of them.
Not all of them. I think a lot of people do, and a lot of people are very sensible. Here's my advice to people, and I'm particularly advice to people who are confused, who are getting a huge amount of mixed messages, whose heart basically tells them that we need energy, we don't want the lights to go out, and that, this XL pipeline is a great thing. That's what their heart says to them. But then another part of them is saying, they're hearing all of this awful stuff about spills and CO2 emissions, and basically we're all about to die. And my advice to them is to be very careful where they get their information from. And look at the person who's speaking to them and ask themselves some questions. A bit like your wife, actually. It's a good example you've given. Your wife, very, heart in the right place. She loves animals and she was trying to do the right thing. Then she looked a little bit closer at PETA and realized, something, I actually don't want to be aligned to these people. And here's some of the people. We should know some of the people here that are against the XL pipeline. For example, there's been about 3 or 4 documentaries made so far against the oil sands of Alberta, which is the oil source that's going to be coming through America down to Texas.
Yeah, we talked to the filmmakers a few weeks ago.
And those filmmakers feature, and they've all featured, a man from my own country, from Ireland, Dr. John O'Connor. And I'd love everyone listening in Nebraska to write down the name Dr. John O'Connor, because he's really worth having a look at. So this guy, he's got a beard, he looks awfully genuine, he's lovely. And there he was, he goes off to Alberta to take care of native people, the First Nations people there. And then this awful thing happens, this oil sands, desperate. And he makes the discovery of 5 very, very rare cancers, a cluster of cancers, 5 of them, he reports.
Goodness.
Plus the death of a 33-year-old man. Now, this is dramatic stuff.
Yeah.
This is the kind of stuff that you need to close down this oil sands in Alberta. This is terrible, absolutely terrible. Now, what he didn't possibly realize was that Cancer Canada, Health Canada, which is the state health authority, need to know about clusters of cancers because they need to monitor that sort of thing. They get in touch with him and they say to him, John O'Connor, can you send, Dr. John O'Connor, can you send all the data about the 5 people infected and about the 33-year-old man who died? And you may be suspecting what I'm about to say next. This went on for about 2 years, and he refused to give over his files.
Yeah, suddenly.
Eventually, he had to, and the 33-year-old man does not exist.
Huh.
And the 5 clusters, which is a huge number, didn't exist. 2 people had cancer. So, so these are the kind of people. Now, here's what I think is extraordinary. Because I think if something is true, just tell your truth loud and clear, and the world will hear you and know your truth and recognize it. If you're a person who then continues to use Dr. John O'Connor, who has made up patients' files, to use him in your documentaries to tell the world that the oil sands is bad, I have to be terribly suspicious of you. And I have to actually, even worse, be suspicious of you. I am not listening to you anymore because you tell untruths. And you actually are somebody who is now broadcasting a man who shouldn't even be a doctor. Who did something. And what's really dangerous, I mean, there's lots of dangers of what this guy did, but one of the worst things is terrifying the First Nations people of Alberta with things that aren't true. So I would say to the good people of Nebraska, you're being told a lot. You're all going to die. There's going to be leaks that are going to destroy the aquifer. We're all going to run out of drinking water. I think we should all hold our horses, work out who's telling you this, and ask yourself if you are impressed by their history of truth-telling.
Talking here with Ann McElhinney. She's at the event this Sunday afternoon in Lincoln called Voices to Preserve America, online at voicestopreserveamerica.com. And a lot of people would listen to this, Ann, and say, all right, so maybe you found a couple people who are liars to try and trump up their cause. But still, the fact remains that the temperature's going up in the world, the oceans are going to dry up, the zebra are going to become extinct, and all whatever. The Himalayas are not going to have ice and snow on the top of them. That fact still remains. What do you say to that, Aaron?
Well, it's not a fact. I suppose it's just as simple as that. So that's not a fact. That's hugely, all of the above is hugely disputed by some of the greatest minds of this planet. And I think one of the things that's really interesting in the whole debate about the CO2 and we're all about to die and all the people, again, I love to just I just think to bring it down to its basic level. Look at the people who tell us that we're all about to die because of our use of fossil fuels. These are the people who use more fossil fuels than any of us.
You're talking about James Cameron now.
Than any of us. No, yes, he's one of them, but I'm talking about the 45,000 young people who descended on Copenhagen for the climate summit. And one of the things they said at the climate summit in Copenhagen was that the single worst thing one human being can do is get on a plane. So you have to ask yourself, who are these people that we're talking, who exactly are these people? One of the other things they love to say is there's a consensus. Thousands and thousands of scientists tell us we're all about to die. Look at the huge number of scientists that tell us we're about to die. Well, here's news for you. Science doesn't work like democracy. It's not if you and me and 25 other people vote for something and it's true. It doesn't work like that. Gravity is gravity. Science is science. One person can be correct, and 100,000,000 others can be wrong. It doesn't matter the numbers. So doing the consensus game and saying loads of us think this is kind of bullying, and it's very anathema to the whole scientific process. So I'm very unimpressed by that. It's very unscientific to say loads of us think this. Well, loads of people think the other. And while there's a debate, and while there is uncertainty, the last thing we need to do is turn out the lights across America. And if you want to turn the lights out across America, it's very simple. Rely on renewables. Rely on wind power and rely on solar. And I will bet you my last dollar the lights will go out, and they'll go out really, really soon. So you have to say to yourself, and I think the other thing that's really worth mentioning, and again, I will be talking about this on Sunday, and I hope you plug for the morning, and I love to see loads and loads of people coming out to the event, because I really like to see them. But the other thing I love to say is, everything has a cost. Nothing's free. There's no such thing as a free lunch. So windmills. So we think windmills are great. Oh, sure, they're marvellous. Listen, they take up a huge amount of room for a start. And they kill about 300,000 birds a year. Now, some people, I don't mind about that. I actually don't mind about that because I know birds get killed in all kinds of ways. But we have to understand there's always a cost. And the biggest cost for me of windmills is the expense of windmills. power and the fact that it's not reliable. And when I have a little premature baby in an incubator, I want the electricity not to go off. You know, this is serious stuff. I mean, where there is energy, there is life. You take a map of the whole world, you look at the whole world, look at the countries that use the most electricity, that use the most energy. America. People live into their 90s here. It's not at all an exceptional thing. People don't. I have a lovely story. I met a guy recently in California. He started talking about his father, and he didn't look too young to me, the guy who was chatting to me. And I said, well, tell me about your father. And he said, let me tell you about my father. My father is 100, and he drives the car, and he plays bridge. And the guys at the bridge club just love him. And when it was his 100th birthday, they phoned the local newspaper and said, we've got this great guy, and he's 100. You know, do you want to send a photographer? And the local paper said, no, that's not a story. Phone us back when he's 105. Now, that is, you see, I love that story, okay? I'll tell you something about that story. You won't hear that story in Tanzania. You won't hear that story in Ghana. You won't hear that story in Africa. And by the way, for those people living there in Africa, that's no joke. We can laugh about it here in the United States, about the fact that people are driving. I know another lady who bought a new car. She was 95. I love that. I find that really, really beautiful. My own father is 93 and had a hip replacement at 91. I think that's great. I love that. But lots of people don't have the opportunity for that. And the reason they don't is because they don't have energy. So let's not be casual about energy. Energy is keeping us alive and making our lives beautiful. And we pay for it. There's a payment of some kind. There'll be something maybe that you think is ugly down the road, but you know something? What choices are you going to have here? And you can make choices. And it's not like we don't know what the alternative is, because the alternative, we have a petri dish. The whole of Africa is suffering from an energy deficit. So it's not like we don't have a petri dish. And I've been there, and it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare being in a country where infrastructure, where the refrigeration is intermittent, where electricity is intermittent, and people are sick all the time from simple things like not having clean water. So these are all the kind of issues I want to talk about on Sunday.
You're very passionate.
Oh, listen, I'm only getting wound up at this point.
All right, well, let's just keep it right there. I've got to move on to some other things this morning, and I know that you can go on forever and ever, and that's why I encourage people to come see you on Sunday. Your last rant there was beautiful. It leads perfectly into where I'm going to go next against the Occupy Omahans here in our fair village. But real quick, for the people who are coming to see you on Sunday, are you going to get into the very public fight between you and Avatar director James Cameron? You going to talk about that on Sunday?
I absolutely will talk about that on Sunday, because we all know who James Cameron is, you know. And I just love the quote from James Cameron. James Cameron said in the Los Angeles Times last year, we need to live with less. We're going to have to live with less. And you know something? I love that. I want to live with his less. 3 homes in Malibu, a ranch in Santa Barbara, a fleet of submarines, 25 cars. He has his own fire truck. Listen, I want his less.
He has his own fire truck.
He has his own fire truck. I want his less. I want his less. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners would like his less, too. Particularly, I think, the houses in Malibu. I take one of them.
Yeah. I just take a room. And you're very interesting, and I encourage everyone to look into this event on Sunday. It's at Calvary Community Church. It's online at voicestopreserveamerica.com for all the details. And McElhinney, just one of the speakers who will be at this event in Lincoln on Sunday. And thanks a lot for your time this morning.
I look forward to Sunday. Take care. Thanks so much this morning.